going to be Carolyn Cox, and I must say that the very first time I heard about this issue was a meeting at her office back in the winter, when I think there were about 15 or 20 people showed up to hear what was this thing about aerial spraying. And the reason that we asked Carolyn to come tonight is that now that we're on to the ground treatments as something new that we have to be very, very worried about in our communities, and not really new because it was part of the plan all along, but it's taking a new focus and significance now that they're moving off of the aerial aspect. We invited her here to explain to us some of the known dangers and risks of these ground treatments that are now, as they call it, tools in their toolbox. I call it tools in their toxic toolbox. That's basically what they have. So Carolyn, we welcome you and ask you to teach us a little bit about these ground treatments that they have in store for us now.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here tonight, and thank you for all the work you did to get us as far as we've gotten. It really, it's been an amazing effort, and you should all just feel really proud of what you've done, and be ready for the next chapter, whatever it is. It seems like, we don't really have a lot of details at this point about the specifics about what's being planned. But we can guess that there are going to be toxic chemicals involved in places where there shouldn't be toxic chemicals. And so I just wanted to give just a few hints of things that we might be looking at once we know more details about what's going to be happening. So one of the chemicals that's been bandied about is an insecticide called permethrin. Chemically, it's in a family of insecticides that are known as synthetic pyrethroids, and those are long words, but one of the things because it's in that family of insecticides, is that it's a chemical that's designed to disrupt your nervous system. Actually designed to disrupt the nervous system of insects, but our nervous systems are similar enough to insect nervous systems that there are many similarities in the way that a chemical designed to disrupt the nervous system of an insect will also affect our nervous system. And then there's some other things that we know about permethrin. A few years back, the Environmental Protection Agency completed kind of a standard process that it does where it looks at the ability of a pesticide to cause cancer. And based on tests that have been done by the companies that make and sell permethrin, they put permethrin in the category called likely to be carcinogenic in humans. In other words, EPA believes that it's likely to cause cancer in people. This is not the very most serious cancer classification that they use, but it's way up there. There are other health problems that are also associated with permethrin, and I'll just run through them very quickly. The National Institutes for Occupational Safety and Health have a huge database that summarizes toxicity information for thousands and thousands of chemicals. And what it says about permethrin is that it's what NIOSH calls a reproductive effector. And what that means is that there are laboratory studies in the published scientific literature that show that this chemical affects the ability, again, this is in laboratory tests, to successfully reproduce. And in the case of permethrin, the problems that they identified were problems with what they call newborn viability. That means the newborn surviving and thriving, and also problems with, I think what in people we would call early miscarriages. In laboratory tests they call it post-implantation mortality, but what it means is that you lose the pregnancy. There's a really interesting, let me just back up 1 minute. Another thing that this database from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health lists is studies that show that the chemical if the permethrin is what NIOSH calls a mutagen. That means that it can cause genetic damage. And one of the studies that is in the database is actually a study done in a laboratory but using human cells. There's a really interesting study done as part of a huge 20-year effort called the Agricultural Health Study, looking at the health of farmers in North Carolina and Iowa. And the study is done by really reputable government agencies, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, and the National Cancer Institute. And in this particular study, what they were looking at was farm women and how often they got asthma. And what they found was that women who used permethrin on the farm were more likely to develop asthma than women who did not. And the last study I wanted to talk about was also just recently published, done by the California Department of Health. They were looking at illness reports in flight attendants. Permethrin is actually commonly used in what they call disinsection of aircraft. That's where they spray the planes, basically. And so they looked at reports of illnesses in flight attendants and found that it was about 17 reports that they looked at, and most of the reports where they could actually identify what pesticide had been used, the pesticide was a permethrin product. And the symptoms that the flight attendants reported were things like headaches, just general irritability, dizziness, shortness of breath. So those are the things that we know about permethrin, and then I think it's really, really important to look at what we don't know. Many of these things are things that we didn't know about the products that were going to be used in the aerial spray program, so you've probably heard a lot of this before, but just to keep it in mind. So the first thing, of course, is we don't really know what's in the permethrin product that will be used. Maybe at some point they'll tell us what the ingredients are, but certainly at this point we don't know. And I think probably all of you know that most pesticides have secret unidentified ingredients, that most of these ingredients are not tested, and they often make up the largest proportion of what's in the product. One of the big problems with any pesticide product, and this whatever permethrin product ends up being used will be included, is that the tests for chronic effects, those are the ones that folks often really care the most about, things like cancer, genetic damage, reproductive problems. In virtually all cases, those tests are done on single ingredients only. But of course, when you're exposed to the product, you're exposed to this complex mixture. And one of the things that researchers have increasingly become interested in the last few years is how our bodies respond to these complex mixtures and how hard it is to predict what a mixture of chemicals will do just based on what the individual chemicals do alone. Other things that I think are really important, especially when you're talking about a large-scale application of a pesticide, is just the fact that we're all different. I think this is probably obvious to all of us. I'm not the same as, we all know we're different, but toxicologists tend to sort of put people in a black box and treat them as if they're all the same. And that's just not the case. Looking at some of the studies that have been done on permethrin, like the study I talked about with farm women and asthma, not all the farm women who used permethrin developed asthma. Some women did, some women didn't. That's because we're all different. Some people are more susceptible to the exposure of the chemical. With the study with the flight attendants, not all the flight attendants who worked in permethrin-treated airplanes developed illnesses. Some of them have more problems with permethrin than others. And there's no way to predict that ahead of time. And anytime that you expose a large number of people, I think it's something that you're going to have to deal with. Let's say I wanted to just mention, there was a question earlier about testing and who does the testing. And basically the way pesticides are studied in this country, the manufacturers of the pesticides do the testing. And if that's not a conflict of interest, I don't know what conflict of interest means. Clearly, they have a very vested interest in presenting information to the government that will allow them to sell and profit from their product. And I've been working on pesticide issues for about 20 years, and it's a problem that never goes away. And it's a problem that I don't have a solution for. I don't want my tax dollars and your tax dollars going to test pesticides so that pesticide manufacturers can profit from selling them. On the other hand, making the pesticide companies do that is a clear conflict of interest. And the only way I've been able to resolve it is what Dan talked about earlier, is that if there's no reason to use them, if there really isn't a problem, well, we actually don't need the testing because we don't need the product. My time is up. I just wanted to end with a quote from Rachel Carson, who always said things better than anyone could, and I don't actually have her exact quote, but she said, if the Bill of Rights does not give us the freedom from being exposed to toxic chemicals, it's only because our founding fathers, despite their incredible wisdom, could never have predicted the way that these chemicals would be used so far in the future from when the Constitution was written. And that's, I think that's where that's the essential piece of what we're talking about tonight. It's that sort of intersection between democracy and science, and that issue of informed consent. And should we be exposed to toxic chemicals when we don't know what they are, we don't know what their effects are, and we haven't given our consent? Thank you.
So much, and that was a very important presentation, again, to let us know that what they have in store for us could end up being just as harmful to our health as the things that have been called off. That's a sobering thought.